Michael, great to see you.
Good to see you. I mean, well, I'm sorry that you were exiled back to your home country here.
Well, I was thinking I'm probably the only person who actually made your position safer in America against the gun nuts because they wanted to get to me first.
That is, you became the most dangerous man in America. I got to take a holiday, then you left. Now they're back on me.
Of course.
So come back as soon as you can.
I will come back and help you again. We're going to come to guns a little bit later. Let's talk about your new movie. It's fantastically entertaining, but like all Michael Moore movies, all the jokes have a little sting in the tail. What is the premise of this film, for those who might be intrigued to go and see it?
The premise of the film is what would the United States look like if we actually lived up to who we said that we are? And basically, I wanted to go to other countries, first to show Americans what other people do. I mean, Americans, and you know this from having lived there, they watch my movie and they're just stunned that people have paid maternity leaves.
Right.
You know, you're supposed to.
Well, I made a little note of some of the revelations, which if you're an American, you can't believe this.
No.
In Italy, they live 4 years longer than the average American. There's only the United States and Papua New Guinea do not have maternity leave. In Finland, school is about finding your happiness rather than just exam results. This would be complete anathema to any American, wouldn't it? In Germany, it's against the law to email your boss or employee out of office hours. And in Norway, you can't be sent to prison for over 21 years. Now, I just interviewed some very dangerous women in American prisons for a series for ITV. And some of them were getting 50 years or life without parole for offenses that here would get maybe 15 years.
Right. Americans watch my movie with their jaws agape. I mean, I've sat in theaters and I've watched. People are stunned to see that you get a paid holiday. You know, it's actually the law in many civilized countries where you are entitled to time off and to be paid for that time off.
Right. I mean, it is, you're not exaggerating. In America, that would be a very unthinkable thing. Is part of the problem for many Americans that still 75% of Americans do not even have a passport, so they never experience another
Correct.
culture.
That is it. That yes, at least 2/3 to 3/4 of Americans never leave the country. As you know, our news media spends very little time on international news. We don't know what's going on. I would bet if you were to walk through Pittsburgh today and ask them about Brexit, they would have no idea what you're talking about.
They wouldn't even know what the phrase meant.
No, and in fact, I would limit the people you would speak to are only those who are college educated, and they would have no idea what you're talking about. We just simply are not educated about the rest of the world. We're not really taught foreign languages. We don't speak foreign languages. We don't have passports, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, our ignorance works against us. And it's because of this ignorance, our politicians are able to say, well, you know, they pay more in taxes in Britain, in France. They got a big high tax rate over there. And they're like, yeah, we don't want that. You know, so we don't want any of the social programs that go with it. But we don't count what we spend on health care. That's not called a tax, all right? Or daycare, or university, or all these things that in other countries, not all, like you have to pay now here for university, but in France and Germany and Scandinavia and Slovenia, you go to university for free. And people are like, you've got to be kidding me. Well, how do they afford that? Well, they must pay a lot in taxes. Well, they pay a little bit more in what's called taxes. But if you add up what we spend on student loans, what we spend on medical care, in the end, we pay a lot more than the Brits and the French and the Slovenians.
What is very interesting about the movie is I kept waiting for you to review, because you call it the kind of, you're really concentrating on flowers, not the weeds, of each European country. So you're deliberately selecting the very best of these countries, which America doesn't have, to say, look, this is how they do it, which could improve our lives.
Right.
But you don't include my country here. Why not?
That was on purpose. I'm no offense.
But not for a good thing, right?
Not for a good reason.
You believe that we have headed as a country, the UK, far too far towards an American kind of existence.
You have drifted toward our way, so why would I come here to learn from you when all I would be seeing is a version of us in many ways these days? It's like if we're the steak of this, you're like the hamburger. You know,
And in what way have you seen us regress?
Well, first of all, the fact that you're making your young people pay for the university in the way that they have to get loans now and they're going to be in debt. You know, why would you send them into a debtor's prison at the age of 22? Just because they wanted to learn, because they wanted to better themselves and better the country as a result of that. I mean, you know, or the fact that the criticism of the NHS, yes, are there problems? Yes, but fix the problems. Don't be creating a two-tier medical system that benefits those who have the money over the people that don't have the money. I mean, but I guess the biggest crime of the UK of the last decade or two is the fact that you gave cover to George W. Bush to invade Iraq. That Tony Blair is, in my opinion, more the cause of the Iraq War than George W. Bush. Because Bush, well, that wasn't a surprise. We expected that from him. But the fact that he was able to use Blair and use other liberals, the liberal New York Times, the New Yorker magazine, who, you know, and he was saying, hey, this is the right-wing thing. I got Tony Blair.
Why do you think Tony Blair, who came into power in a blaze of excitement and promise, very like Barack Obama in many ways, that he was going to make it, you know, a fantastically improved country. Why do you think Blair would risk everything on supporting such a right-wing president as George W. Bush?
Boy, well, that's the $64 million question right there. Wouldn't you love to know the real answer?
What do you suspect? Was it vanity? Was it ego? Was it the fact that he was very popular in America by doing that, and so it made him look good?
Honestly, I think that Blair suffered from what we usually suffer from with the Brits. You know, we want you to like us. We think you're smarter than us. You have got that accent, you know. I mean, really. I mean,
no, that's true.
And there was something weird in Blair where he wanted the Americans, and in particular this American president, to like him, and he wanted the American president to, you know, take him on as his junior partner, but if you step back from it, it was what the critics of Blair in this country said, that he looked like a lapdog. He looked like Bush's pet.
In Iceland, in the movie, you report on how they put the bankers that brought them to their financial needs into jail. Nobody in this country has been jailed for that. We had the same economic crises here. But more importantly, no one's been brought to account, no politician or anybody else, for taking us to what many believe was an illegal war in Iraq. The Chilcot report is about to come out, which is the official inquiry report into what happened. If it is established that Tony Blair basically went against the will of his own people and his parliament to coerce George Bush and to go along and acquiesce with the American military machine to go into this war, should he face potential charges and therefore potentially imprisonment?
Well, I felt this for some time. I think both Blair and Bush should be charged with war crimes, because the definition of that is the country of Iraq did not pose a threat to your existence here in Britain or our existence in the U.S. The only reason you would go to war is to defend yourself against somebody who's trying to kill you or invade your country or whatever. But none of that was going on. None of that isn't what happened. And so to initiate a war upon a people like that and to kill hundreds of thousands of Iraqis, and now having unraveled the political and social and religious infrastructure of that part of the world, the refugee crisis we have now, I mean, I don't watch the news here because I'm in the U.S., but it's never mentioned in the U.S. that this refugee crisis is the result of Blair and Bush.
Right.
You know, to a large extent. I mean, the drought in Syria had something to do with it, obviously, but we helped to create this mess, and then the Germans, who didn't create the mess, step in and say, we'll help fix it. It's amazing, isn't it?
It's an extraordinary situation, but let me ask you about this big EU referendum we have in this country. You know, the British people will go to the polls and they will vote whether to stay part of the European Union after 40 years together or to come out. Having been around Europe for this movie, what do you think we should be doing?
Well, I'm glad that my movie is opening during these couple weeks leading up to the election, because essentially, if you go to see this movie, it says, why would you want to leave Europe? You are Europe. You helped to create Europe. Europe, as we know it today, exists because of the UK. You saved Europe. You sacrificed and suffered to save Europe and create the Europe that we have now. And now what? Oh, I don't like the way Brussels is spending the money. So, well, you may not like the way Parliament's spending the money. You don't get to leave. You know, you're living in Hull. You go, I don't want to be in the UK anymore. We're out of here. You know, because I don't like the way Parliament's spending the money. You know, fix the problem. Elect better members of Parliament to the European Union. But this, I got to tell you, to those of us who are outsiders, this election coming up looks bonkers. I mean, we call it cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. It's like so insane, the thought that you would want to leave the European Union. And it's so childish in a Donald Trump sort of way. And I guess that's a lot of the fear of the immigrants and the nationalism that Trump, you know, proposes.
Let me play devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Because there's a fear of the immigration problem because there's a real problem. And
fix the problem.
How would you think
just fix the problem,
or this country can fix this problem of now millions of people moving across the continent?
Well, first of all, right, there's a serious issue in that part of the world where they're coming from that neither Britain nor the U.S. should have really a say in how to fix it in Syria, because our ideas were the wrong ideas, and we should not be at the table deciding what to do now. We should make reparations. In fact, we haven't paid enough to take care of these people and the problems that have been created, that we created for them. So I think the UK and the US has a responsibility here. The idea that to help to be part of the problem in creating the immigrant crisis and then say, oh, we want to leave the European Union because of the immigration crisis. Well, part of it was created by you. So you have to buck up here, guys. You know, you have to be responsible for your actions. But it's more than just that. It's like, I mean, to the average American, it's like the idea of we could have a vote to remove ourselves from North America. Like, you know, or that Texas could vote to leave the U.S., you know.
As some of them want to do.
Well, and you know, maybe not such a bad idea now that I think about it.
Let me turn to the American presidential race. It has been quite extraordinary to watch from me. I covered the last one in America, and that was far more straightforward. Now you have this volcanic character, Donald Trump, who has swept all before him. How has that happened, do you think? I know your views of Trump are pretty negative, but explain the phenomenon of Trump. How has he managed to get the nomination in the first place?
He's a great manipulator of the media. He understands that Americans like to hear over and over again, we're number one, we're the greatest, I'm going to make America great again. You guys are all great. You're all great out there. You're all great. We love that. You know, and he just keeps saying that. But he's also saying some other things. And the way he's going to win, and he may win, is all he's got to do is win the traditional red states from Idaho to Georgia, and then win the 4 Rust Belt states of Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. These are 4 states that generally vote Democratic, but all have a Republican governor right now because the people have had it, because the liberals didn't help them. You know, the unemployment rate.
When I go to New York or LA, as I do a lot, even actually in New York it's pretty split because he's a New Yorker, so a lot of New Yorkers like him. In LA, they're like, this can't happen in our country. There's no way he can become president. Everyone seems to have consistently underestimated what the middle America view of somebody like Trump is.
Somebody like Trump who says, Ford, if you close your factory in Detroit and move it to Mexico, I'm going to put tariffs on those cars so you can't sell them. Apple, you're not going to build those phones in China anymore. You're going to build them in the U.S. You know, Trump is against NAFTA. He's against these trade agreements.
Is that fundamentally wrong? I mean, is there a basis?
No, that's why he has a great chance of winning, because some of the things he's saying, or that he knows to say to a population that's been hurting in the Midwest, it's music to their ears. And it's a dangerous moment right now. And Americans who don't take this seriously, like you say, people in LA going, I can't believe this. Well, you better believe it, because it can happen. And I remember, you know, when I was 25, I said there's no way Reagan was going to be president of the United States. Well, then I'm 45 and I'm going, there's no way George W. Bush is going to be president of the United States.
Or reelected.
Or even reelected. So now with Trump, I'm dead serious about this. This guy has a chance.
People here assume that Hillary Clinton is going to win and that she's fantastic.
Why? Why do you think that? Why do people here think that?
They think it because they think that by comparison to Trump, where they just see these sound bites which sound so aggressive and inflammatory, they think that she's she's Bill Clinton's wife, that she's a very smart lawyer.
Okay.
You know, how can America not vote for her?
He had 17 opponents who were all smarter, more down to earth, more grounded, tried to use logic in debating him, tried to use facts, Then when that didn't work, they tried to use ridicule and comment on his genitalia. That didn't work. Nothing worked. And Hillary is starting to do the same sort of, trying to be smart, trying to be logical, whatever. I don't think that that's going to do it. I think, my own personal opinion, what I'm going to try to do to bring Trump down, myself, Bill Maher, other satirists, is satire and ridicule is what is going to be used to destroy him.
Professor Stephen Hawking told our program, when he was asked to describe the Trump phenomenon, called him a demagogue.
Yeah.
Is that a word you would use for him?
Yes. I mean, he is the definition of 21st century fascism. That he believes strongly in using the state and business together to have power, and to get this power, blame the other, blame the immigrant, blame the Muslim, the Mexican, in his case, women, which is, I think that's his tactical mistake, that he's gone after the majority gender. That is what may save us, because he's not going to win the majority of women.
Let me turn to one other big issue which you and I have shared, guns in America. 32,000 people are killed by guns in America every year. In this country, it's 32 a year, and we have very few guns. To me, there's a pretty obvious correlation between the volume of guns in a society and the amount of gun crime and gun death. But it's not getting any better. You made a great movie, Bowling for Columbine, back in 2002. But if anything, the situation's a lot worse now than it was
Much
even
worse.
then. How does it ever change? Can it change?
Yes, it can change, but there's some fundamental things that would have to change about the American psyche here, because you're right. You have 32 gun deaths here. Your kids watch the same violent movies. They play the same violent video games. You have the same number of broken homes that we have. I mean, there's not that much. You have the same 23 chromosomes in each one of your cells that we have. You're not better than us. So why don't you kill each other at the level we do? You have a violent past. You have a history of enacting violence upon the rest of the world, as we have in this last decade or two. So what is it about you that's different from us when you're not really that different? I mean, I think that's the fundamental question. And President Obama has wanted the Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, to study gun violence as a disease, as a specific American disease. The Republicans and the NRA have fought him every step of the way. They will not allow the funding to go forward to study why America and no place else. Why not Britain? Why not Canada? That's the question that needs to be answered. If you want my answer to it, it's the same it was when I made Bowling for Columbine. It's that we are a fearful nation. We get scared for some reason. I mean, you live there long enough. Maybe you're the better one to answer this. What is it about us? Partly the way fear works is through ignorance. That if you keep people ignorant long enough, it's easy to manipulate them with fear.
I always say it is very like the Wild West in the sense that everyone assumes or fears that everybody else has a gun. Right. So the slightest dispute, a road traffic dispute,
yes,
a bar fight, whatever it may be, whereas here it would be a punch-up, at worst probably. In America, the first reaction is, he or she may have a gun, I better pull my gun.
Right.
And which is the Wild West mentality. It's two gunslingers in a bar.
But the majority of our guns are with people who live in the suburbs and in rural areas. All these mass shootings you see, for the most part, it doesn't happen in inner city schools. Kids don't go in the schools and shoot up a bunch of kids. It happens in suburban and rural schools.
I mean, we had the 20th anniversary of Dunblane.
Yeah.
Which was the worst shooting we've had in a school. And because we got rid of all our guns after that, we've not had a school shooting in this country since 1996. America's at 165 or so since Sandy Hook. And I found it unconscionable that you could have 20 children blown to pieces in their classroom and not a single change to federal gun law was made.
That's right. 1 million people killed by guns in the U.S. since John Lennon was killed by a gun in New York City. I mean, seriously, you would think that we would go, we've got to fix this, and this is the saddest part about us when we have a problem like this desire to either stick our head in the sand or buy more guns, You know, whereas you had that school shooting, Australia had a horrible school shooting, and you decided to fix the problem. You know, it has always amazed me about the British. Here you are, 2 years after World War II, 3 years after World War II. This country was decimated. It was bombed. It had no money. People were rationing into the 50s. And yet you still created a national health service to take care of your people. You had no money to do that. You're suffering from the effects of this war still. And yet you thought, we have a problem. We can't let anybody be sick and not be able to see a doctor. And we're going to fix this. You know, this is what is outstanding about you and your history. And it's sad to see in recent years Britain become more like us in many of these ways. And you don't want to go down that road when it comes to guns and violence. But if you create disparity between those with money and those without, if you let that gap grow, let people suffer more, let people be manipulated with fear about the outsider that's here in Britain, you know, that 32 deaths a year, you know, you hope that it stays that way.
Final question. It's the European Football Championships that have just started. You've been touring Europe. You must have got a sense for who you think may win this competition, even though I'm imagining you know nothing about soccer, as you would call it, at all.
I actually now know a lot about soccer because somebody took me to a game at Arsenal Stadium.
My team.
A number of years ago, and I did not want to go because it looked like a boring game to me. There's never a score. It's like 1-0, you know. And it's like we like big scores, like in basketball, 110 to 109, you know. Or when we score a goal in football, we get 6 points, not 1. He gets 6, you know.
How did you find it at Arsenal?
It was amazing. It was, I would say, a religious experience, and I'll tell you the moment it happened. The Arsenal member of the team had the ball, and he's kicking. He's not going down the field with it, but he slows down a little bit, and he's got his foot up on the ball. I said to the guy next to me, "Wait, there's nobody in front of him. Just go to the goal." And he goes, "Oh no, there has to be a defender." I said, "What do you mean there has to be a defender? This is not American football." He's like, "Fine, we got the ball. Let's go." And he goes, "No, that wouldn't be right." I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "It wouldn't be fair." I said, "What?" I thought, yes, that's how the rest of the world plays football. It wouldn't be fair. You know,
it's probably because it would have been offside, actually.
It's called offsides.
Yeah,
yes,
that's not about fairness. It's an illegal maneuver.
No, but the reason they made it.
Oh, I see, because of the law.
Yes,
because it's unfair.
The rule was initiated 1,000 years ago, whenever, because it's unfair. You don't want to be able to do that.
Are you now, as a result of that religious experience, are you now officially, like me, an Arsenal supporter?
I am an Arsenal supporter.
Excellent.
And I follow this, and I think that maybe the best analogy I can draw right now with the upcoming election here and your wonderful game of football is that why would you go to the polls and vote to remove yourself from the Premier League? Why would you? Well, literally, why is Britain wanting to go down to the minors? Who would leave the Premier League? If you're the worst team, you're forced to go down there. Why? You're the top. You're the inspiration of Europe. Why would you leave?
Are you aware of the slight irony that you and I therefore support a team whose nickname is the Gunners?
Yes, but you and I are big believers of irony. I mean, that is so.
Michael Moore, it's great to see you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for sparing the time.
Thank you.